This video is about the idealistic will. It is part of a series called The Keys to Self-Motivation and Free Will. In Big Brother 1984 style, media companies and corporate social networks control the public by controlling ideas. Sinclair Broadcasting recently required all its news anchors to read the same statement.
Fight fake news. That's the mission statement of the largest local broadcasting corporation in the US, and it's requiring its anchors to read out a scripted message to back that up.
We are extremely proud of the quality, balanced journalism that CBS 4 News produces.
But we are concerned about the trouble and trend of irresponsible, one-sided news stories plaguing our country.
Controlling exactly what people think, and this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
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 This is extremely dangerous to our democracy. This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
Sinclair owns local television stations that reach 72% of U.S. viewers. Another 1984 Big Brother is YouTube. They will decide how many people will see this video that you are now watching. Here is a viewer graph from the last video I posted. A day after subscribers watched the video, YouTube restricted the views by making the video hard to find. Rudolf Steiner's philosophy of freedom has a history of establishment authoritarians trying to limit access to its ideas, ever since it was banned in Russia over 100 years ago. Free thinking and expression is central in the philosophy of freedom. The philosophy of freedom videos I am producing support free speech, speak up against media censorship, and do not always obey the rules of political correctness. You can help by subscribing and sharing the videos. But even if you are subscribed, Big Brother YouTube has admitted it may still decide not to inform you of a new video. For someone who is interested in self-motivation and free will, it is important to understand why we act. Is our action determined by our own idea, or is it based on an idea implanted in our head by someone else? Unless you are living in a cave all by yourself, it is unavoidable that your head will be filled with the ideas of others who want to control your thought and action. In the previous video, 9.0, we discussed conceptual intuition. There is always a reason for why we act. After we act, when we have the time, we can review our actions to look for the urge or idea or principle that determined the action. The reason why we act is discovered by reflecting on the action until we experience the insight of conceptual intuition. The source of all our knowledge is observation and intuition. Now let's move on to section 9.1 to learn about the idealistic will. If now the conceptual intuition, the ideal content of my act of will, occurs before the corresponding perception, then the content of what I do is determined by my ideas. In an act of will, the ideal content is the idea that guides the action, while the corresponding perception is the observable action. An intentional act of will contains an idea and a resulting action. After the action takes place, we use conceptual intuition to discover the idea of the action. But before the action takes place, we also use conceptual intuition to select the idea of the action. If I select the idea by means of conceptual intuition before I act, then my action is determined by my idea. In this case, my will becomes an idealistic will, because my willing is determined by my idea. If the reason I act is an idea that has been implanted in my head by others, and it has not been made my own by means of thinking, then it is not my idea, but rather is an automatic response to programming. This is not an idealistic will, but instead it is a programmed will. For example, I was spending the day writing something. Evening came, and I was tired and lost the motivation to continue writing. I thought, why not quit work and relax by watching a movie? Instead, I reflected on the situation and saw the fatigue was not the result of needing rest, it was a symptom of writer's block. I was blocked from getting ideas. So I turned to the principles of thinking to evaluate my thinking. The principle that came to mind was, while I am reflecting on the object, I am absorbed in it. My attention is focused on it. The appearance of this principle in my mind was my conceptual intuition. An intuitive insight also brings with it inspiration and an impulse to act. I applied this principle to my situation by directing my focused attention to the writing outline I had prepared. This small detail got the ideas flowing again, which woke me up and motivated me to start writing again that evening. Because the conceptual intuition occurred before my action, the action can be said to be the result of idealistic will. There is one more condition for idealistic will. The source of the idea that determines the will needs to be the conceptual world of universal concepts. The determining factors of my will are to be found not in the perceptual, but only in the conceptual world. My will is determined by my idea. An act of will that depends on nothing but this ideal content must itself be regarded as ideal, that is, as determined by an idea. We live in both an inner conceptual world and an external perceptual world. When we examine an act of will, the leading factor that determines an action may be found in our inner conceptual world or the external perceptual world. The external world can compel us to act by triggering our animal instincts, our emotions, or our habitual thoughts and programming. This is not freedom, because we are being controlled by reactions triggered by the outside world. Freedom originates in the pure thought of free thinking, where we are self-motivated to do what we consider to be right from the inside. When we act according to our high ideals, our action is filled with love for the objective of the deed. When I am making my ideal gourmet hamburger, I love cooking. Going back to my writer's block story, I conceptualize the situation facing me into universal concepts such as writer's block, fatigue, and lack of ideas. This raised my life situation into the conceptual world. This lifts me above my emotional reactions, disappointments, or justifications for failure, and instead puts me into the calm and hopeful deliberations of pure reason. Ideas are produced by thinking. I reasoned that since writer's block was making it difficult to get new ideas, I should look at my thinking. So I called up my knowledge of how to think to examine my thinking. I then selected the ideal principle of focused attention to apply to my writer's block. The idea on how to overcome writer's block originated in the conceptual world. It was my idea that I experience as intuitive insight. The key to being self-motivated by idealistic will is finding the right idea at the right time from the conceptual world. To learn more, visit philosophyofreedom.com. The next video in the series, The Keys to Self-Motivation and Free Will, is called Ethical Character.